So I know you like it when I talk to people with radically different opinions, and this has been an extremely popular request down in the comments box. Daniel Hannan, he's a Conservative member of the European Parliament, he's an arch Eurosceptic, desperate to get out of the European Union and has been for a very long time indeed. So I want to ask him about that. I want to ask him about the other big issues, the divisions in the Conservative Party, who does he want to be PM, what makes him tick, the usual. And appropriately enough, I'm going to ask him these questions, where else? In Europe House. Dan Hannan, great to see you. You are looking so dapper. I'm embarrassed to be sitting next to you.
I had a feeling you'd be dressed like this, Owen, and I thought, if this is your video channel, it's the Owen Jones thing, I've got to look like what people would expect a Tory to look like, so I put a tie on especially for you.
You need a top hat or something.
Yeah, I left that downstairs.
Oh, well, blimey. Right, so Dan, you're quite European, aren't you? I mean, you speak at least 2 European languages.
I speak French and Spanish, yeah. And I love Europe. I've lived around Europe. I've worked all over Europe. The good thing is I associate with Europe as parliamentary democracy and the rule of law and all that. Yeah, sign me up. I mean, if being a Europhile means that, great. But I think it's probably fair to say that I'm Francophile, Hispanophile, Germanophile, Lusophile, Turcophile, but not really Europhile in the way that the word has now come to mean pro-EU.
What is the threat, as you see it, of the European Union?
It's basically about democracy. We fought a civil war in this country to establish the principle that only the people that we vote for get to raise taxes or pass laws. And in Europe, we're run by commissioners, not just that we didn't vote for, but that nobody voted for. Your great hero, and who was kind of a hero of mine as well, Tony Benn, had this great line where he would say, if we were run by a bunch of unelected British commissioners, and if they, as a result of being unelected, had come out with such spectacular disasters as the euro and the common agricultural policy, you'd say, I hope we'd all be against that too. That wouldn't make you anti-British, he'd say. It wouldn't make you an Anglo-skeptic. It would make you a Democrat. That's right. And he was right. It's such a weird thing that in this country, pretty much uniquely, you're on the defensive to say that. It's a normal, natural thing to make your own laws, trading and cooperating with your friends and allies elsewhere.
What if we gave you more powers, people like you, elected politicians? What if we did that and democratised the European Union instead?
You see, the problem with that is that democracy isn't just an occasional right to put across on a ballot paper. Democracy, I think, also depends on a relationship between the people who pass the laws and the people who are expected to obey the laws. There has to be a sense of community of identity. The more you can devolve and decentralise and disperse power, the better for everybody. And the thing that really puzzles me in this European debate is how very often the kind of people who in a domestic context are the keenest advocates of stronger local government, more devolution, more local referendums, when it comes to Europe they have this blind spot. They just can't see that there's a contradiction between decentralising power at home and centralising it in Brussels. It's a very, very odd position, but it encompasses, I would say, 3/4 of the Lib Dems that I know.
What if you were to say that there are lots of unaccountable powers in the world? We've got increasingly large corporations, they have huge power and sway over elected governments. And democratically elected governments pooling their resources together is quite an effective counterweight.
Do you know anyone who thinks that? I would invite them to come and spend a week where I work in the European Parliament. There is lobbying by these mega banks and multinationals on a scale that is beyond anything we see in the national governments. And the reason that they love the Brussels system so much is because it's that much more remote, that much further from the voter, more opportunity to reach these backroom deals with people. The answer, surely, if we don't like these vested interests, these cartels, is to bring decision-making closer to the people. And that's when you cut out the opposition. You don't completely abolish it, but you make it much harder. You don't have the kind of TTIP type secret negotiations going on, which you get with these huge remote corporatist interests.
Another argument people would make about the European Union is that it's a way of preventing a race to the bottom, that if you have basic workers' rights, which all European Union member states subscribe to, then that prevents a race to the bottom.
The big knockdown argument on all of these things is, again, to quote our friend Tony Benn, he always used to say, I'd rather have a bad parliament than a good king. Yeah, there was a time in the late 80s and 90s when it looked as though the EU was building a lot of social protections and so on. But look at what happened more recently in Greece particularly. I would not have voted for Alexis Tsipras, right? It's not my style of politics. He was right that you shouldn't be forcing a country in Greece's situation to raise taxes. But apart from that, I don't think he was right about very much. I don't think there's any doubt he was elected very clearly on a platform of ending the bailout and borrow racket, and then he put it to a referendum and won explicitly on that issue. And yet, exactly as Tony Benn had predicted 40 years earlier, the EU forced a left-of-centre government to drop the centrepiece of its election platform. And that's the point of the bad parliament versus the good king. You give away your rights because you happen to agree on one issue today, you can never get it back.
My parents voted against entering the European Economic Community as it was then.
Great foresight.
But
yeah.
people, of course, the British people voted for, didn't they? They voted for decisively back in the 1970s.
And that settled the issue for a generation. And I suspect that this one will as well, either way.
Will you just say, that's it for a generation, I'm done,
yes.
I've lost the argument?
I think I will. If we get very close but don't actually leave, there is a logical implication that there will need to be some repatriation of powers so that we can build a new consensus that both sides can live with. And I think that would happen. I think the only situation in which that wouldn't follow is if there were a 1975 type result. In other words, an overwhelming vote, despite the best efforts of your mum and dad, an overwhelming vote to stay in. I think that would be seen as a mandate for us to join the Euro, a mandate for us to join Schengen. I think that would be a whole different situation.
Do you think David Cameron's waging a campaign of fear?
Yes, I do actually. I think that, I can't speak for every Conservative Eurosceptic. Generally, they acknowledge that it's only because of David Cameron that we're getting the vote at all. You know, he didn't need to promise it, he didn't need to deliver it. He hasn't played silly buggers with the question. He unhesitatingly accepted the Electoral Commission's recommendation for the wording that would appear on the ballot paper, and he's kept the party neutral. You know, he hasn't tried to prejudice the process. Of course, within that, of course he's going to campaign with every weapon at his disposal, including Project Fear. It's what happens in a campaign. All's fair in love and referendums. I mean, that's a different thing.
As the old phrase goes.
Yeah.
You say he didn't have to offer a referendum. Others would say otherwise because of these turbulent MEPs and crucially, of course, his backbenchers, that this referendum is just party management.
Without it, I'm not sure he would have a parliamentary majority now. I was really surprised by how much the UKIP vote hurt Ed Miliband rather than us. David Cameron had made this promise, which meant that if you were a Tory leaver, you could vote Tory knowing that you were going to get another go when the referendum came. But Ed Miliband, and I remember from your columns at the time, you were as incredulous about this as I was. Ed Miliband not only didn't match the promise, that was foolish enough, but instead of then doing that and keeping stum about it, he carried on attacking the idea of a referendum. And that confirmed, it seemed to me, all of the prejudices people had about Labour being out of touch, metropolitan. You know, there was a real kind of, we'll do anything for the working man except ask his opinion.
Will David Cameron have to resign if Britain votes to leave the European Union?
Well, the question is whether he would want to. Having taken the line he has in the referendum campaign about what a disaster it would be, would he want to? And I doubt it.
So you're worried that he won't accept the verdict of the British people?
No, I don't think he would. I just think he would. I think he would resign rather than implement a policy that he didn't believe in.
Sorry.
But I mean, I don't know, and he's the guy to ask, not me.
Whose side do you think you're more aligned with? Ian Duncan Smith or George Osborne?
Ian Duncan Smith, I think, is probably the most traduced and misunderstood figure in the recent government. I know the idea has got around, and it will be in the comment thread under this video, that somehow he is motivated by kind of wanting to take money away from poor people. I can't think of a worse misreading of someone. The kind of centrepiece of his approach is poverty is not really about an absence of wealth, not primarily. In his view, poverty was tied up with a whole bunch of other things. Family breakdown, substance abuse, poor qualifications, lack of ambition. And his point was, you have to tackle these things in order to tackle poverty. Obviously, the Chancellor's motivation is a different one. He's Chancellor, and his job is to try and balance the books. And the problem was that the move to universal credits and all of the things that Ian Duncan Smith were doing in the short term don't really save any money.
I mean, who do you lean to in that dispute, do you think?
I think Ian Duncan Smith was right to say, he had that phrase, it's not about saving money, it's about saving lives. I think there are some tough decisions we are going to have to make eventually in terms of the total social security bill. But when we're looking at disability allowance, the sums involved are not such that they're really going to make the difference in terms of whether Britain is in deficit or not.
Do you think Osborne would be a good leader?
I think there can be. I think I can think of better leaders.
Who? I want to hear. Who would you like to be leader?
This is going to really offend all of your viewers and probably offend the guy I'm going to name. But the guy I think would just be a brilliant leader intellectually and in terms of achievement. Michael Gove.
I knew it. I knew it was coming.
You see, look at you. Now, if you're doing that, imagine what they're doing watching.
Rocking in the fetal position, dribbling, no doubt.
But again, same thing as with Ian Duncan Smith. You cannot doubt the sincerity of his motivation.
We don't have common cause on that, but we do have areas where we do have lots of common ground. War on drugs. It's a failure.
It's a failure by almost any measure, yeah. We cling to policies and attitudes out of familiarity, right? From first principle, I mean, future generations will find it very, very odd that we criminalised cannabis but not tobacco or alcohol. I mean, that's arbitrary and random, and yet because it has a cultural context, we all kind of think it's normal. Criminalisation means lack of control, means people can cut narcotics with all sorts of poisons and other addictive substances. It brings hell to the producer countries. I mean, in the highlands of the Andes, you have lawlessness where you could have prosperous yeoman farmers if the thing were legal, you know.
So you decriminalise drugs?
Yes.
Proportional representation, you're a supporter, which makes you very rare amongst Conservatives indeed. Do you think if PR were to come about, do you think the current Conservative Party and the current Labour Party would stay together in their current form?
No, I mean, as a matter of fact, when you have proportional systems, you tend to have many more political parties. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, there is an argument that it's a good thing to have the coalition formed before the election so that everyone can see what it is. But the really strong argument for first past the post that I grew up with, which is strong government, that works in a two-party system. It doesn't work in a 4, 5, 6-party system, which is what we're drifting towards.
Trident, waste of money.
It is a waste of money now, yes. For the most basic reason, which is actually we'd never use it. When I think of what our armed forces could do with £20 million, we were suffering preventable casualties in Afghanistan because we didn't have the right helicopters, we didn't have enough flak jackets. You know, it's an enormous expense.
You really are just a raging lefty, aren't you, Dan?
I think I'm an old Whig. It's very, very odd that tradition is now so unusual. That people who buy the economic liberalism tend not to buy the political radicalism, and vice versa.
If we would just go by the measure of inequality, would you prefer us to be more like Sweden or more like the United States?
I'm more interested in absolute wealth than in absolute equality.
But Sweden has higher living standards than us, doesn't it, as well as being more equal?
They're both good things, right? I don't really know anyone who thinks that equality is undesirable. There's lots of evidence that it leads to lower crime and less stress and all this. I mean, you don't have to be on the left to see that. The argument against it is not that it's a bad thing. It's that the price required to achieve it through state coercion is excessive, both in terms of diminished freedom and in terms of diminished prosperity.
Lastly, Donald Trump. Are you terrified? If he became US president, would you be scared about literally the future of humanity itself?
I'll tell you, do you know, Owen, the thing I've always believed all my life is that people are wiser than experts. I feel, it's a sort of dark night of the soul, watching a country that I admire and a party that I admire, in a process that I admire, producing this result. And it's making me really question some of my beliefs about how primaries work. But we're not quite there yet. There's still just a chance that we may be saved. If that was the last question, though, and I have to, since you're talking to me about democracy, I have to say you have, and you deep down, you know, if we stay in the European Union, it's on the road to less and less democracy.
Are you trying to turn the tables? This is not how the format works.
This has been, I mean, I know what it is. You're sticking up for your guy, your party leader, and all. I kind of get all that.
That's an outrageous accusation.
I'm going to give you a present, and I'm hoping that this is going to convince you. Why Vote Leave, which is published tomorrow. You're getting the first copy of it.
Wow!
And
seriously, and who says we don't do product placements on this?
And it makes
on this channel
the argument in, I hope, the kind of democratic and anti-corporatist language that you and I share, and the beliefs we have in common about how an oligarchy will loot a system if they get away with it, and how the best antidote to oligarchy is trusting people.
Michael Gove for PM. Good job I haven't eaten. But nonetheless, it was a massive honour to speak to Daniel Hannan. He's an eloquent guy. I love his voice. He's got such a I'd listen to that voice all day if I could. We've got loads of other interviews, obviously, on the channel. You can click up there if you like. And we've got loads of cracking interviews to come. Keep the comments coming. Subscribe. I'll see you next time.